What's up? In this video, we're going to be going over the best video settings for your iPhone. Now I'm going to be showing the iPhone 15 Pro in a lot of these examples. However, the settings that I'm going to be talking about will largely be applicable to earlier models as well. Now you've probably seen a lot of high quality iPhone videos out there and wondered how to achieve similar results. To be honest, a lot of that is the color grade, is the time of day, is the blocking, the staging, composition. All of these things factor into achieving high quality video. However, it is still very important to make sure you're getting all of the right video settings dialed into your iPhone so that you have something to work with. Now, first off, a simple one, switch from HD to 4K. Basically 4K rendered to HD looks sharper, has more clarity than HD rendered to HD. Let's talk about motion blur. So 24 frames per second is something you're gonna wanna switch to just as a general rule. You can do 24, you can do 30. 24 frames per second is generally considered standard. To achieve motion blur, yes, you do need around 24 frames per second, but then you need to match that with your shutter speed. And so the basic rule is if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you'll want to double that in the denominator of the shutter speed. So 24 frames per second, shoot at a shutter speed of 1/48, or commonly 1/50. If you're shooting 60 frames per second, 1/120 shutter speed. Now this is done to roughly depict motion blur as it is perceived in reality. And that's the catch. In the native iPhone app, switching to 24 frames per second is not really going to create that motion blur, because by switching to 24 frames per second, you are not automatically switching to a 1/50 shutter speed or a 1/48 shutter speed. Your iPhone is compensating for the light. So if there's a lot of light, which usually there is in regular daytime settings, the iPhone is going to crank that shutter speed up. It's going to be like 1/1000, 1/2000 shutter speed, and that's going to make your footage really choppy. That's why variable NDs or just regular NDs are commonly used, because you can put that on, you can block a ton of light from entering, and that allows you to put the shutter speed back down to 1/50 or 1/48 for that 24 frames per second. There are ND filters that you can use for the iPhone, luckily, and you can manually control shutter speed with third-party apps, but that's something that we'll get to later on. So now let's talk about white balance and exposure. So by default, your native iPhone camera app is going to automatically adjust white balance and exposure while you're recording video. Now this is great if the video clips are just really casual and just for fun, but if you're doing any level of videography, changes in white balance and exposure during recording will look unprofessional, to say the least. So in settings under camera, record video, scroll down, turn on lock white balance. So this is not going to allow you to customize white balance, at least when we're dealing with the native iPhone app. However, with this enabled, the iPhone will lock white balance at whatever it was set at right before you hit record. Exposure is locked manually by holding down. You'll tap and hold down on the screen wherever you want to focus, and what the iPhone does is it automatically locks exposure and focus together. So that's where you'll see AEAF lock, so that's auto exposure, and auto focus lock. It's locking focus in place as well, so it's not going to autofocus. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Now with third-party apps, you can separate these two, so you can lock exposure but keep autofocus on, which is really nice, but we'll go into that later. All right, for stabilization, now for a non-moving or static shot, ideally you're going to want to put the iPhone on a tripod, and then for moving shots, the iPhone would be on a gimbal. However, if handheld is part of the style you're going for, then that's great. If you're going handheld and you want smooth footage though, there is an additional stabilization setting, which if you go to record video under the camera settings and you scroll down, you will see enhanced stabilization. So if you enable that, it will stabilize the videos even further by zooming in slightly. So you are gonna lose a bit of resolution, but it will definitely be worth it if you have to go handheld and you want it to look smooth at the same time. Now, action mode is an even more extreme version, and it will decrease the resolution even more, so you can't shoot in 4K, and your environment will have to be brighter. But if you're shooting outside during the day, this should be no problem. Next, what are the correct settings for slow motion? Now, ironically, the best settings is not slow-mo. mode on the iPhone, because what it will do is restrict the quality of video to HD, so you can't shoot in 4K. So what you can do is, if you are on 4K and then you click on the FPS, keep clicking until you go through 24, 30, and then land on 60 frames per second. This is gonna take more than double the storage space on your iPhone than shooting in 24 frames per second. This option is really nice because it doesn't automatically slow your video down. When you put it in the video editor, you have the ability to then go in and manually speed ramp it, do whatever you want, change the entire video clip. If you're in 60 frames per second, for example, you can slow down the video clip to as much as 40% speed without looking choppy. And then the nice thing about this is that it will play back in real time, like I mentioned before, so you can preserve the clip and just have the video play back in real time and then just have the end be slow motion. However, I do suggest that if you know that a clip that you're shooting is going to be played back in real time and you're not going to slow it down, definitely shoot in 24 frames per second. And then for video clips that you think you're going to slow down later, definitely shoot in 60 frames per second. Now let's talk about shooting in ProRes on your iPhone. Now ProRes is Apple's popular codec that allows you to shoot in 10-bit color depth. This allows much more flexibility in post in terms of color grading. However, this means that the storage space of these video files are going to be substantially larger than shooting regular H.264, H.265. If you are recording on the native iPhone camera app, this ProRes is the ProRes 422HQ, which is going to be 17 times larger than when you shoot at H.265. So if you'll be doing a ton of in-depth color grading and you have the capacity for it, I suggest switching to ProRes. So you'll do this by going into the settings, camera, go to formats, scroll down, and under video capture at the very bottom of formats, you'll see Apple ProRes. So go ahead and enable that. And in terms of the encoding, we will cover that in just a second. Now, if you try to record internally on your iPhone after you've selected ProRes, a message will pop up saying that your iPhone is not able to record either 4K or HD at 60 frames per second. So basically, if you want to shoot in 4K and up to 60 frames per second, you'll have to record externally using an external SSD. And now we'll be talking about the gamma curve everyone's been talking about since the 15 came out. And this, of course, is Apple Log. And to enable this, you'll go back to Formats, you'll go back to where you enabled ProRes. Right underneath that, you'll see ProRes encoding. Click on that and check Log. Just to give a very, very brief summary, log is short for logarithmic, and it refers to the gamma curve. Shooting in log increases your dynamic range, retaining more information in highlights and shadows. Now, there's a ton of video tutorials explaining how to best grade Apple Log, so it's worth doing some research there. There are a lot of free LUTs available online that you can use to convert the flat-looking log footage to Rec. 709, but there are a few ways that you can also do it manually in DaVinci Resolve, through color space transform, through the Aces tool in DaVinci Resolve. From there, you can apply further stylistic LUTs that are made to work with Rec. 709 footage. Now, the major downside when using the native iPhone app to shoot log is you can only shoot Apple Log if you're also shooting ProRes at the same time. So if you want to shoot in log, you're also going to have to shoot in ProRes. Now, this problem can be solved with third-party apps. So while the native iPhone app does have a lot of cool features that you can use, if you want to go further into depth, as I recommend you do with manual controls, there is a free and relatively new app called Blackmagic Camera App. Now, the interface of the Blackmagic Camera app may appear familiar to you if you've ever used Blackmagic's cinema cameras, such as the Pocket 4K or 6K. And it's a really comprehensive interface. It has all the controls right on the screen. You can go into settings for more, with fully manual controls on everything, including white balance, ISO, shutter speed, the ability to lock them or to have them fully auto. And so this is a great app, especially since it's free. You can also choose to shoot in Rec. 709, Rec. 2020, and yes, Apple Log. Then, even when you're on Apple Log, you can choose for it to be ProRes or, get this, H.265 or H.264. So yes, this app does allow you to shoot H.265 with Apple Log. So you can take advantage of this amazing color space without a video file that's 17 times larger than H.265. Of course, the small file size of H.265 does come with downsides, and those are related to the compression that it goes through. But overall, it's a great option if you don't want to be storing hundreds of gigabytes of video for just one shoot. You'll notice the app gives you the option between H.265 and H.264. So H.265 is newer and it's more efficient in file space, but it's going to give your video editor a little bit of a rough time. However, I do recommend you shoot in H.265, even though it will make your video editor run a little slower, because it enables you to shoot in 4K 60 frames per second, while you cannot shoot 60 frames per second at 4K with H.264. So I know that's a lot of information, but it just goes to show how flexible the iPhone really is. And while there's a lot of different settings you could use for different scenarios and different contexts, these settings will provide the groundwork, the foundation on your journey to achieving the highest quality iPhone video footage. Make sure to subscribe to see more videos like this, and happy shooting.